In 1993, in the case of Commonwealth versus Welch, the Kentucky Supreme Court clearly held that the criminal laws cannot be used to punish women who become and choose to remain pregnant despite struggling with drug addiction or dependency. The prosecution would not be dissuaded. They actually appealed the decision and argued that the 1993 Welch case was no longer good law. Surprisingly, the appeals court agreed with them, and so Ms. Cochran appealed the case to the Kentucky Supreme Court, which heard arguments on it last December, in December 2009. The ACLU actually brought and argued that 1993 Welch decision, which the prosecution is now trying to argue is no longer good law. So the ACLU submitted an amicus, or friend of the court brief, in the Cochran case, urging the Kentucky Supreme Court to uphold its original decision, which held rightly that the best way to address issues of pregnancy and addiction is through increased access to health care. I think these prosecutions, they reflect our national obsession with the war on drugs and with treating addiction as if it's a crime and not a public health issue. And from a legal standpoint, they also reflect the rather alarming notion that women lose their civil rights when they become pregnant. If prosecutions like Ms. Cochran's are allowed to stand, if women can be held criminally liable for anything that appears to or threatens to or perhaps unintentionally harms their fetus, then virtually every pregnant woman is going to be subject to control and scrutiny by the state. This isn't hypothetical. In fact, at the beginning of the 20th century, up until the mid of the 20th century, women could be kept off of juries. Women could be kept out of institutes of higher education. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld state laws which said you could limit the amount of hours a woman could work in a day. And the justification for all of this was to protect the future of the human race. That because of women's childbearing capacity, they could be denied equal treatment under the law, and their constitutional rights to privacy and to bodily integrity could be violated. And supposedly, as a country and as a matter of constitutional law, we have rejected this vision of women's role, but I think these prosecutions reflect that we haven't rejected it completely and that the vision still persists. Kentucky is certainly not unique in bringing this sort of prosecution. The ACLU has been involved in these cases for decades, from Illinois to New Jersey, Maryland, New Mexico. Fortunately, pretty much every state that actually addresses this issue has ruled that the criminal laws were never intended to reach the relationship between a pregnant woman and her fetus. The one exception to that, unfortunately, is South Carolina, and we can see the devastating effects of that today. Just last year, a pregnant woman struggling with mental illness tried to kill herself, and while she survived, she lost the pregnancy. And she was actually charged with manslaughter, and facing serious jail time, she pled guilty as opposed to going to jail. Is failing to get adequate prenatal care now going to be a crime? What if, pregnant women are not supposed to drink lead-contaminated water? What if a woman can't afford the filter? In Kentucky, it's coal country. Pregnant women work in coal mines. Is that going to be a crime? Are there going to be laws now passed saying that women can't hold certain kinds of dangerous jobs? I think the scope of these prosecutions goes far beyond just drugs or even something like smoking or alcohol to really affect every aspect of a woman's life. Nobody is suggesting that pregnant women are somehow exempt from the same drug laws that all of us have to follow. If a pregnant woman is selling drugs, she can be charged with selling drugs the same way any of us could. But Ms. Cochran was not charged with a drug crime, and she was not charged under a statute that just anybody could be charged under. She was charged because she was pregnant. So if Ms. Cochran had had an abortion or had not been pregnant in the first place, there would have been no crime committed. And that's what's unconstitutional and what denies women equal treatment under the law and violates their rights to privacy and bodily integrity.